Welcome back to another episode of Bento Bureau, the show where we talk about Japan from an international perspective. I'm Basim Hijazi, you can call me Buzz. And with me, as always, my lovely co-host on the side here.
What's
Wait, no, you're on this side. You're on this side. My lovely co-host and friend, Bastian Harth. How's life treating you, buddy? You just came out of your Japanese class, didn't you?
Yeah, I had Japanese before this. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Are you still? Would you say you're still good at Japanese? I mean, you are a self-proclaimed polyglot, are you not?
Well, I would say that I haven't forgotten many things because there weren't too many things to forget. Let's put it that way. No, but it's getting better. I'm putting, I put time in every day, 30 minutes actually over the day, and learn grammar, learn kanji as well as vocabulary. And with my great sensei, it's going well. It's going well. Are you studying any Japanese at the moment?
I mean, if you consider watching things studying, then I am. I mean, that's my own sort of way of keeping in
I
touch
see.
with the language. Would really love to, visit sometime next year when they open the border again, if it feels safe and normal. But yeah, maybe we should catch up sometime there and make a special episode there together. What do you think?
Damn, that would be nice. Yeah, would love to do that.
Yeah, the
So,
dream.
Buzz,
Anyway,
what are we
yes.
talking today about?
We're going to be talking about female entrepreneurship and women empowerment in Japan. So it's kind of a subject we've touched on in the past, with some of our guests. But what's special about this occasion is we're going to be tackling the subject from more of a macro perspective, delve into some of, the research that's going on in the country and some of the things that's going on there. So we're delighted to be joined by two guest speakers today. And let me
Yeah.
switch to them right here. Mia and Finson and Alma Karabeg. How are you guys doing?
Great. Thank you for having us, Buzz and Bastian.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you very much for this interview.
It's a lovely to have you on the show. So, together, Mia and Alma are actually the founders of an initiative called Female Entrepreneurship for Women Empowerment in Japan. It's a project supported by the Scandinavia, Japan Sasakawa Foundation. I think I got that right. Mia and Alma, pleasure to have you on the show. You know, what I really found interesting about your profiles, you both hold IB diplomas. That's something I share myself. Mia, you pursued a BA in marketing and management communication and an MBA in applied finance. Alma, you've got a BA in political science, something we're close to ourselves. You've studied Japan's culture, society, and politics. And together you both know each other from extensive experience working together in startups, NGOs in Europe and abroad. I'm really curious to know what brought you two closer to Japan. Alma, in particular, you've conducted some of your studies on Japan in the past. Perhaps we can start off with you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, it's correct. I did studies on Japanese political and economic system. So this, from educational side, I already had some knowledge of Japan even before I went there. But I encountered Japan when I traveled there for the World Congress in Junior Chamber International. This is organizations where Mia and I have done quite a lot of work in the recent years. And just by seeing Japan and experiencing Japan from another perspective made me more curious about the Japanese culture. So this is something totally different than when I studied. I see one side of it from a very theoretical approach. And then when I started to collect data and see it from empirical side, I decided that it will be a good deal to start to dig more into the structures of society in Japan.
Mhm. I just saw it. I don't know if you guys have noticed it, but you have a little pin here, a Japanese flag
Yes,
pin. I didn't see
yes,
it at first.
yes. It's a pin. This is something that I got from our friends in Japan. So I thought occasion today is perfect to wear it.
Yeah, I think it's perfect. How about you, Mia? What is your connection to Japan?
Yeah, so Alma and I, we got to know each other through our work, as Alma mentioned, at the Junior Chamber International, where it's basically an organization where you get leadership experience through work in your local community, but also work globally. So we traveled extensively together. We initiated some projects together, for instance, building a school for girls in Uganda. Also working locally with Startup Weekend, for instance, which is 1 weekend to launch your business idea. So it's a pitching competition that we also work together on. And we also traveled together to Japan, and for that we did a cultural exchange project where we also learned more generally about Japanese culture. Absolutely fell in love with the country. It's really amazing. People were amazing, or are amazing. We've been there now a couple of times. Almost been there 3 times. I've been there twice. So we went there first in 2016 for this cultural exchange project, and we got to know a lot of interesting people, basically, and we just got curious to find out more. Also comparing Japan to Norway, also to learn ourselves. And we were just really hungry to find out as much as we could. And also through that, idea of JCI, of looking at what can you do in local societies, what can you do globally to make a change. We also heard from our colleagues and friends in Japan that Japan is struggling with a gender gap, basically. As you might know, Japan ranks 121st among, I think, 153 countries in the world when it comes to gender equality. And Alma and I, we're very passionate about gender equality, and wanted to also initiate the project that supports the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 5 on gender equality. So for us, it was a very natural step to work with that, but we have been researching Japan for a while and also looking into the entrepreneurship ecosystem there. So very interesting. I mean, I can go on forever.
And what stood out to you? Like you mentioned how you during your cultural exchange, you're comparing how things were like between Norway and Japan. What particularly stood out to you as something that was very interesting about your time in Japan?
Several things. I think you always come to a different country for the first time with some ideas, something you watch in movies, you read in books, you have your colleagues and friends there already, so you already met people, so you have some idea. But I think maybe that's your experience too, being in Japan. You don't really know before you're there, and you immerse yourself with the culture. And that's also something that we, try as much as possible ourselves. I think what surprised me was that so many people said that Japanese people are very reserved, and that's also something people say a lot about Norwegian people. Both cultures are very collectivistic, as opposed to being individualistic. We can think of, for instance, the US as a very individualistic country where people are not afraid to stick out, in a crowd and maybe boast a little bit about successes they've had, and they're not afraid of being different. And so I think I came to Japan thinking that Japanese people would be very reserved, but that wasn't really the case at all. People have been tremendously open and very helpful, and very sociable and easy to get to know. So we've been very happy about that. Maybe you have something to add to that too, Alma.
Yeah, I totally agree that we have encountered a different side of Japan. I think this also has a lot to do that we already have a network in Japan. So we had a pool of people that we can approach, contact, and who can assist us in our work, in our research. So we have been quite lucky from that part. And I can also say that in my books and during my studies, we have learned a lot about Japan as individualistic society, collective society. But when I went there, it's very difficult to generalize. So this is something to learn in Norway, in Europe, in Japan, and everywhere. We cannot generalize things. We cannot make such theories because in the end, it is the individual that makes the choices. So we shouldn't we shouldn't be blinded by everything we learn.
Yeah, I think the points you've mentioned is something I think both of us have experienced as well in Japanese society. Yes, I think there's a
Absolutely.
tendency of collectivism, but the question also has always become for me, and it's not an area of my expertise, but I also felt some kind of individualism in there. I mean, each individual has their own kind of standpoint in the society. It's just that the society works a bit differently there, and there's definitely this homogeneous kind of aspect, and following the rules, everyone following like the Japanese kind of way of living, or the general rules that are set in the society are kind of clear to everyone. I feel clearer than in some other societies, I would say. But yeah, generalizing it is also quite difficult. I've also seen Japanese who are completely falling out of that typical Japanese culture or Japanese society. So definitely true. So what sparked your interest before all of this? Like that is my curiosity. How did you get there? Why Japan out of the sudden?
Well, I can continue on what I was just saying, and it is also, we can say, a leap of the faith. It's because as we attended so many congresses and conferences in our NGO JCI, one of the biggest events is actually taking place in Japan. So, and I can say that in terms of membership numbers, JCI Japan is the biggest organization in our global NGO. So it means that there are, I think, around 40,000 members. And they also had quite many members who are today in the politics in Japan. So it is a very respectable organization in Japan, and especially very big in JCI Tokyo, JCI Osaka, and the major cities in Japan. So since they arrange the biggest and I would say most popular events in our organization, we decided, of course, to go to the World Congress in Kanazawa. And this was our first trip to Japan, where we did the cultural project that Mia was explaining about. And then we did not think that we do one project and then we stop, because there is always another question. There is already something more to learn about. So this is why we choose Japan.
So it was
very different from Europe.
So it came really through studies, through work, that you kind of got acquainted with Japan and got the curiosity and interest.
Yeah, and a lot of support too. So we started working on this cultural project, which was more of a, let's say, curiosity about the country and its people and language, etc. But when we moved into the business aspect of it and the entrepreneurial side, and studied the startup ecosystem starting in 2018, we also received a lot of support from others who said that there is definitely a need to boost the Japanese economy and to get more entrepreneurs, male or female. So we saw a lot of support there, which also really encouraged us in our work. As you might know, the growth rate of Japan's GDP, despite it being the fourth largest economy in the world, it's actually lowered over time. Before the pandemic, it was at 0.65%, which is really low if you compare to the heyday of the 90s, where it was around 5%. And Japan is also facing some other issues like an aging population, so they need to have more people in the workforce. So this is why also Shinzo Abe was, the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was also having policies to get more women into the workforce, to get more women into permanent position, not just part-time work, and also getting more women on boards. But we see that there still is a need for that today, and having that support too is something that really encourages us to keep working and to present our results eventually.
Maybe we bring it to the point now and see, like, we haven't asked you, but what is your project exactly about? You've mentioned already a couple of things, and I think our listeners or viewers can definitely understand what you're doing. But maybe you can bring it to the point in a few sentences. What is your research project currently about?
Right. So it's an excellent question. So apart from just generally studying female entrepreneurship in Japan, we are actually working on a survey. So right now we started out this spring with the project where we started out interviewing contacts. We interviewed scholars, other researchers, we interviewed female entrepreneurs, we interviewed people from the government, basically anyone in the startup ecosystem, to form a survey where we want to find out what is motivating Japanese women or women in Japan. I mean, we don't really exclude it for also foreign women as well. So what are the motivating factors for starting companies? What are the challenges as well? So we try to find out, just given society as it is in Japan, just looking at it as neutral as possible. I mean, we're very aware that we're two Western women, conducting this survey, but trying to be just as neutral as possible in asking questions around motivation and challenges, and trying to find out which factors actually led women to success despite which other factors. And the goal with this is to, we want to disseminate the results. We want to also look at society being the way it is, which factors can we encourage? Can we maybe create a framework that can be used for government officials, other decision makers? We also want to improve practices also for venture capital, making sure that venture capital or funding is accessible to women. So we try to look at these different aspects in that research, so that we can, present concrete solutions of how to promote female entrepreneurship in Japan.
Maybe quickly for our viewers, because I think not everyone is aware, what is venture capital catalyzing?
Yeah, so venture capital is essential for funding companies. You can start a company by yourself, with your own money, or so-called bootstrapping with the help from friends, colleagues, contacts. But usually, if you want to have quick growth, if you're very ambitious about your startup and you want to, massively expand, hire more people, things that cost a lot of money, you're going to want to approach additional form of capital. So that can look like venture capital. It can be a private equity company, a venture capital company, can also be a bank, but in Japan, it is notoriously difficult for startup to get funding via banks. That is mostly accessible through larger companies. So if you just start your own company in Japan, it would be very unlikely for you to just approach a bank and ask for a loan. And you also have angel investors too. Those are investors that are likely to invest in a company. So it doesn't have to be through an organization. It can also be wealthy individuals that like your idea and, may or may not help you with insights and advice during this founding period.
the more I hear angel investor, the more I want to become one. It's such a beautiful job position, isn't it? It sounds nice. I'm an angel.
And they truly are for some people. I mean, when you're lucky and you get the access to that type of funding, I mean, that can be an excellent opportunity both ways, right? Also for the angel investor.
And the national survey that you have planned, it's coming out next year. So, it would be really a great idea if we can, come back again next year in another episode and discuss those results in further detail. But based on your, experience talking to people in Japan, researching systems and the framework of how things work, let's say, I'd like to understand from your perspective, at least, to what extent is it a difficult endeavor for a female entrepreneur to make a startup and, achieve success in Japan? Or maybe we can compare it to even, being a foreigner in Japan. What are the steps of that? Is there differences? I'd be really curious to learn more about that based on what you've learned in the past couple of years.
Yeah, I can tell you that this is also one of the reasons why we are conducting this study. First, we wanted to look at the institutional support to female entrepreneurs in Japan. And then as we started to discover more networks and more programs in Japan, we learned that there are actually two groups of female entrepreneurs in Japan: those who are Japanese women starting their own business, and then we have foreign women entering Japan in order to start a business. So we are actually talking about two different groups. And this was not something that we were aware of when we first designed our project. So this is a very good and interesting question. So far, we can see that the foreign women who enter Japan, they are not constrained by the structures in Japanese society, while Japanese women, they of course have attachment to their own society, and there are other structures in society that dictate the way they will behave. So looking from institutional support perspective, we can say that this is not actually so much significant for the foreign entrepreneurs entering Japan, because they can find the venture capital elsewhere. They're not very much dependent on this, since they already decided to come to Japan to start their own business. And of course, it will be very interesting to look at the results of the survey, because this is something that is going to show how are Japanese female entrepreneurs thinking, whether there is a strong motivation, but not enough incentives from the governmental side, or maybe even constraints, given the fact that they cannot really earn above a certain amount of income. So we have a lot of institutional barriers for women to start their own enterprises. So this is not only sociological, it is also a political question.
Did I understand that now correctly, that particularly foreign entrepreneurs who come to Japan, they have other capital from their home countries as well? Like for them, it's much easier to start a business?
Well, either they have their own capital, and then, as Mia mentioned, we already did another study in 2018 looking into the Japanese startup ecosystem, and then we discovered that actually Japanese government is very much keen on inviting the global talents. The last prime minister, Shinzo Abe, has made something called Innovation 25, which is a policy that will attract foreign global talents to Japan in order to boost Japanese economy. So they are not necessarily thinking of supporting only Japanese entrepreneurs in the country, but inviting those who can really be beneficial for the increase in economic growth. And there are quite many so-called special zones, like the most famous one would be in Fukuoka,
Yes.
where foreign Oh, great. So you have a connection to it?
Yeah, yes, I lived in Fukuoka for 10 months and I love the city very much.
Yes, so this is a place where quite a lot of foreign startups can just enter and start doing their own business with the support of Fukuoka local government.
I think
So that's one
point there. Not just that formal framework, but also foreigners coming into Japan. They sometimes have the benefit, or at least we've heard that through our interviews, that they have this benefit that they don't have to follow the rules as much. They're sort of forgiven, if you can say it in that way, because they're just foreigners, so they can continue their business. They're not so much questioned. People aren't really boycotting them, or not looking at them, because they're foreigners. So they can run their business a bit more unhindered. Whereas when you're Japanese, you're held to different standards. There's more rules that you have to follow. One example being, let's say, if I was an American going to Japan to start my business, it will be, okay for me to talk about my business and promoting it and having lectures about it. People will be interested in that. But if I was a Japanese person and I start self-promoting, I would have a so-called big mouth, and I would be kind of frowned upon. So you can have some benefits as foreigners, but there are some other challenges as well. But also, I think women overall have a lot of benefits in starting companies too. I think a fair point is that not everyone wants to start their own company, and we're definitely not there to force people to start their company when we go through this journey. We just want to show that opportunity is open. But we did see a lot of women who are talking about the benefits of starting a company. Like, one thing is, if you're very ambitious during your studies, you're doing very well and you really want to excel at something. Several women have said that they didn't find that career path within one of the major corporations, that they just knew that there would be a glass ceiling, they wouldn't have the same opportunities as men. So that's why they pursued an entrepreneurial career instead. Also having that workplace flexibility, having children, maybe having daycare at the workplace. Now, the daycare is actually pretty well or pretty good in Japan. But as you know, with startups, you usually have to work pretty late. And you might not have a spouse that is willing to take the same amount of care in the house. I actually saw a study where women do 5 times more housework than men do in Japan. So I think just getting that flexibility through founding a company and setting the rules yourself of how you want it to be is getting pretty attractive to women, especially when you also want to have that opportunity to realize your own, aspirations and having a career.
I find it quite, how should I say, hilarious as well as sad at the same time. What you said at the beginning, that gaikukuji no gaijin dakara ii yo kind of kanji. Like, it's kind of what we had in any. I think all of us have experienced it some way in Japan, let it be during the studies or speaking Japanese. But anyways, I just find it interesting that it also comes up in the business world when it actually comes to building up your own company. For me, what is interesting now would be, as you said, that particularly women have it very difficult to kind of advance in their career. There's this kind of ceiling, right? Which we have also seen in previous episodes, and I think in the research we have done on Japan during our own studies. It makes sense that they go and start their own business. But how many female entrepreneurs who start their own business and who are Japanese are actually there in Japan? Are there many? Are there more than men, or are still men mainly the ones who are starting a business?
Yeah, so looking at early stage founders, there's actually very similar situation that what we're seeing in Norway, that it's the double amount of men. So for every woman, there are 2 men founding new startups in Japan. And we're also seeing that in Norway, despite Norway supposedly also being a very equal country. But when it comes to startup activity, there's just much less from women. That being said, we do see a lot of women entering startup competitions, straight out of university or while in university. So we do remain quite hopeful that this could change for the future. We do hope so, but let's see. So far, men are definitely far more represented.
Because Buzz is trying right now, sorry, let me interrupt here. Your camera kind of changed a bit. I don't know if you see it yourself, but
I don't
you're
know what's
kind of very
happened.
colorful.
Trying, I'm working on it.
Can you just turn? Yeah,
Oh,
perfect.
Perfect.
There you go.
Perfect.
Turn it off and on again. That works usually. Thank you. Sorry, Alma,
Fantastic.
didn't want to
Yes.
interrupt.
Yes, I wanted to continue where Mia left off, and this with quantifying the female entrepreneurs. Of course, in terms of numbers, there are more men entrepreneurs. This is not a secret, and but who can say that it also matters what type of businesses they actually start. And we have been quite fortunate to meet several female entrepreneurs during our visits to Tokyo, where women entrepreneurs want to start a business not in the typical female sector, like those service sector are usually where we find a lot of female entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
But we have also find female entrepreneurs in the tech. So this is
awesome.
This is something that there is a change in the mindset, because as we have been talking about the survey, yes, we will measure the motivation factor in women, but then we will also look at how did they get there, like what was the obstacle and what was the advantage of doing so. And the most important thing is when we speak about gender empowerment, it is not necessarily only quantifying, which means that, yes, we have a big number of female entrepreneurs, but do they really get a lot of access to venture capital? Do they really get the seat at the table? Or are we just using the numbers to show that we have some improvements? So this is where we can statistically maybe create a wrong picture, because the change in mindset is what we need to have in order to change the structure in society, because we are the ones creating the reality.
And
I can see. Go ahead.
Sorry. So, I mean, and what's, since we're comparing entrepreneurial kind of work with the traditional corporate structure in Japan, and, you always hear about, when you read the news, there's always this talk about the maternity issues and how Japan, the corporate structure doesn't exactly provide enough for mothers in Japan, and which discourages, we've heard all this talk even in some of our research in university and whatsoever. So, I mean, I'm curious to know, do you think entrepreneurial businesses led by women have a chance to kind of change the way work-life balance is in Japan? And does it have the potential to kind of solve some of these issues like maternity discrimination and problems with the lack of leadership in positions, women leadership positions? So I mean, you read all this stuff about womenomics and how there was a target this year with I think it was about 30% of women in leading positions in the country. I haven't been keeping up, but I don't believe they've come close to hitting that target. So
No, you're
do you
right.
think that, okay, I'm right. So yeah, what do you think about, the role of entrepreneurship, especially led by women? And do you think that it has an opportunity to kind of mitigate some of those issues?
Look, I mean, founding a company is no easy feat. I think you're going to have a hard time finding work-life balance. I think that's going to be a constant struggle. And I'm sure if there's some founders tuning in here, they will they will nod their heads and say that that is going to be difficult. I think the point with women starting their own companies is that they can set the agenda, right? So they can shape a bit more their work life. They can shape it around the needs of their kids. We've heard of entrepreneurs who have daycare, for instance, in the workplace, or flexible work hours that they also extend to their female employees. So they're also setting a great example for other women who want to also have a career in these companies, thus creating also a much better work environment for women in general. So I think, having more female leaders who become more conscious of the needs of the women in the workplace. That's at least what we're trying to find out more about in our survey.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some networks that actually start to solve this challenge themselves, which means that women who are in this situation, they start their own co-working places, they start their own incubators and so on, supporting other women in the similar situation. So this is where we see that it's not coming from the government side, but it's coming from the market and business sector themselves.
Really interesting. And speaking of government, just to cut you off one more time, Bastian, I'm curious to know if you know anything about, representation of Japanese women in government compared to in the business side. Do more women represent the Japanese government compared to business, or is it the other way around?
I don't have the numbers on that, so I'm not sure. I do think in government it is more than in business. We can figure that out for you.
Yeah.
But one thing that we do see in business is that generally women have part-time positions. They don't even have full-time positions, which make them extremely vulnerable to situations like the global pandemic, for instance, that they're very easily let go and don't have the same benefits that men do in the workplace. It also means that they work more in service professions as well. So, professions that also, again, are very vulnerable during these times, and also professions that are less paid. So, even during Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, or former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's time, women were increasingly in the workforce. We still see that, women are making half. I saw recently half of what men are making, and I think it's just due to them working in service professions, part-time jobs, jobs that are generally not that well paid. So we also have to look at, what kind of positions that women have once they enter the work market, and for that, I think it's just a massive disparity there between men and women.
Yeah. The reason why I ask is because I'm just curious if meaningful change is to happen to the proportions we're looking at. I'm wondering if the change needs to come from government before changes happen in the business world, or does one come before the other, or vice versa? I would be really curious to know more about that, but maybe we can look that up later and just see.
Let's look that up. I think it's a very interesting question overall. Someone said very well that once Japan put their mind to something, once things are decided, things are mobilized very quickly. So I think if the government put gender equality on the agenda, it was to some extent during former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's time, but now the new Prime Minister hasn't even addressed the issue so far on gender equality, and I think that needs to happen. But in the meantime, we shouldn't sit around and wait for anything to happen. I think businesses can have really a lot of impact, the way they organize themselves. I think also it would be to their benefit that companies are seen as fair and good workplaces that people actually do want to work for. And I think they would generally benefit from having a more diverse workforce. It's been several times proven that having more diverse workforces, more diverse boards actually translates to the bottom line of the companies. So, well, hopefully in the end, it will come both from business and government, but...
Yes, definitely. It is business and the government, and we can also say civil society, because they are all part of the governance system. So expecting things coming from the government itself is not always the fastest way to make the change. So the market is already doing their part. As Mia has mentioned, the diversity and inclusion in the business place is a very important part. And then we also have the civil society, where we also see a lot of NGOs started by women, female entrepreneurs who create their own networks and run their own startup competitions and so on. So this is all a very important part of changing the governance system in Japan. And then another point is that, as we explained in the beginning, since we have international perspective, and not only just international perspective, we have a Western perspective on looking at the things. So we have to be aware of our own unconscious bias. As we know, Japan has other value system, and the one thing is not better than the other. And women, they have their own respected role in society, and this is something we have to acknowledge. So what is equality for them does not necessarily mean the same as equality in Europe. This is a very important part, and also during our research and our survey, we have to be conscious of that.
And how do you think you overcome that limitation? Or how do you propose to overcome it?
Well, we, both Mia and I, we have studies conducting both qualitative and quantitative research from our master degrees. So we use that because we also have an academic approach to this, and then we have studies on Japan, and we have a lot of contacts in Japan, also at university level, governmental level, and we also have a lot of friends who can help us as well to tell us in case we ask culturally sensitive questions, or in case we maybe start to generalize or look it from a not appropriate perspective. So we use our network to correct our possible unconscious bias as well.
Yeah, I think the key thing is that we try to listen more than we, tell how it is. Of course, now we're in a situation where the study just started, so we're actually talking a lot about something that we, don't know yet. We do have a lot of information from interviews, bits and pieces here and there, but I think the survey is really going to help us, retain that objectivity and really learn from the Japanese female founders.
Can I ask some kind of unexpected question?
Shoot.
Would you like to try working in Japan for a couple of years? Let it be in the corporate world, or let it be in the startup scene?
So I wouldn't exclude anything, right? I'm actually, speaking of learning Japanese, I am currently learning. Alma already has a head start on me there. She already started learning in university, but
Nice.
I am actually undertaking that big feat of learning Japanese from scratch. I think, you always have that possibility, and it is a culture that we definitely want to learn more about. So actually being there as much as possible and immersing yourself in the culture is a part of that. How about you, Alma?
Well, it would be definitely interesting. I'm sure there is always a lot to learn when we expose ourselves to different working environments. I already did work in several other countries in Europe, not in Japan. So I think it would be challenging to work such a long hours in Japan. There will be I think that will be the biggest challenge, because now we are used to this European style, which is much more comfortable than working in Japan.
So I work for a Berlin startup, so I think I can transition quite comfortably into the long hours of Japan. But I think there are other things that we wouldn't really be, entirely aware of until we're there. For instance, here we're very career-minded, and it just goes without saying right now that if you work for, a given amount of hours in one field, you're an expert and you advance. And that I might, find that might not be the possibility if I were to work in Japan. But who knows? Maybe founding a startup in Japan.
Maybe through your connections, you never know.
Never know.
Norway is one of the most gender equal countries, right? I think in the world, isn't it? Is there anything that makes you furious, like why Japan, for example, still isn't on that same level as also a developed country? Or on the other hand, more something positive? Do you see any lessons that Japan can learn from Norway?
Oh, we can absolutely learn. I think gender equality is just something that needs to be on the agenda always, because we do see that you never fully get there. And that goes both ways, both for men and women. What we see in Norway is that in Norway, people are not afraid of saying they're proud of their country. They like to say they're from Norway. I think Norway is just, it's a good country in a lot of ways. It's a safe place to grow up. It's relatively wealthy. So, people have quite a comfortable life there. But that also closes people towards a lot of dialogue when it comes to gender equality. Like, for instance, I said, there are more men who found companies in Norway than women. Actually, twice as many on the first startup level. And I think just if you assume that you already reached gender equality, you will never quite get there. You will be blind towards the biases there are. And also living in Germany, Germany is also considered very equal. And I can, for instance, myself enjoy a very nice career here, but I also met women with children who told me that when they are interviewing for jobs, as soon as they let it be known that they have children, then suddenly the interview changes tone and they don't get the job. And they won't be, it's assumed that they won't be as available as let's say counterparts that don't have children. So that is also a huge issue, and I think we should still learn from each other as much as we can and keep the debate going across borders. But yeah, back to your question about what we can learn from Japan. I think that
no, vice versa, what Japan can learn from Norway.
Yeah, I think Norway was quite good when it came to policies. So really strong policies for gender equality. It's a bit controversial some places, but having a quota for having women on boards, for instance. Norway was also quite early with voting rights for women. Now, of course, we have that in Japan, so it's not something, new. But I think Japan will also eventually get there with that mindset that women also need to enter the workforce to also contribute to the economy. But I think the framework there is very much on, okay, women need to be there not for their own financial freedom and the equality in the sense that they have more options, but more in the sense that they will contribute to the economy and, boost the GDP for Japan.
Oh, have we lost Alma?
I didn't notice it. Hello.
Oh, she's back. Hold on, let me bring her back in just a moment. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, yeah, I think you're right what you said earlier. When I look around here in Germany as well, I think in each and every country, even though the gender equality is quite high, there's still so many things that can be done. And there's still so many societal things that haven't changed very much. It takes a long time till it changes into people's heads, I guess, or in their minds. And it just requires the right policies, the right quotas, but also, of course, the teaching and the spreading of awareness in each and every one. So yeah, seeing Japan behind, like so far behind compared to other countries, is definitely worrying.
In terms
but I
of
hope it's all,
global goals, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I hope that Japan will change or become a bit more open. I think it's going in the right direction, but it's still a bit too slow compared to other developed countries, for sure.
Yeah, and it's a complex topic. I mean, we realize that very much coming from a different culture, but if you look from a Japanese perspective, why would women want to enter the workforce, for instance? Why do they want to contribute economically? And I think in Japan now, with the current work ethic that is there, people work extremely hard and they're very devoted to their jobs. And there's also a lot of extra social interactions that are sort of demanded that go with the job that you cannot do if you have a family or you're the main caretaker of that family. So women also don't necessarily want to enter the workforce. And I think that's where entrepreneurship give that really good opportunity for women to also form how they want work life to be. It doesn't have to be that you have to kill yourself for the job. You don't have to work that hard.
One question that comes to my mind as well is, and I mean, that goes a bit away of your research, but I wonder how it would be for the Japanese man working under a female boss, right? I mean, since that society is still in that regard a bit behind, I can imagine that must be also very difficult. I think it might be difficult from a societal perspective. Not that anything is wrong with that. That's not what I'm trying to imply. I'm just saying that for a Japanese man who has been living in a Japanese society, that could be a challenge. It's a mindset that needs to be changed as well.
Yeah, we haven't really. It's not something we will look into our research, so it's not part of that. But you ask a very important sociological question. So this is a topic where a lot of well-known scholars have been writing about, such as a topic on masculine dominance. So this is gender equality, gender empowerment is much about power relations in society. And we are talking a lot about male, female, but we know there are other genders as well. And then we have this power relation where in very many cultures, it is expected that the man will be one being more dominant, having more power, having important positions in society, company, and so on. And the woman would be the one more submissive. And then we have this interplay where a woman actually wants to become submissive because this is how she will earn her role in society. So then we are talking about the mind change, because with this mind change, we will have the change in society. So what would be the answer of the Japanese man working for a female boss? I think there are such companies as well. I think maybe those companies are more internationally oriented. So there will be a very interesting topic for some other research.
For sure, it would be other research.
What we've seen, though, through interviews, is that it does tend to be so far that the workplace is quite international. So when there are cases of men working for women, maybe they're Japanese, but maybe the overall environment is more international. But I think also in time, men will see it as an opportunity, because if you also work for a female leader, it might also be someone who is a bit more might be someone who is a bit more considerate of that work-life balance, from through their own experiences, might be someone who understands that you need to get home to sit at the dinner table with the family, maybe rather than just working late. This is something we don't know yet, but I think at least having a more diverse leadership or more diverse boards, you will see also some benefits for the male workers too.
Yeah.
I agree
And
with that.
speaking of things we don't know yet, the national survey that's going to be happening next year. We were talking briefly before this episode broadcast, but you both mentioned to us that the original plan was to actually conduct the survey this year, but due to certain circumstances happening this year, it was pushed back. So I'm really curious, before we reach our time, what do you think some of the implications are that the pandemic holds for work-life balance in Japan, one, and two, on the survey itself? Do you have any kind of expectations of what you're looking to see in terms of what's going to change after this year?
Yeah, it's an interesting time to start any survey. Of course, it might skew the results a little bit. Maybe more women want to become entrepreneurs. Maybe more women are finding challenges and will have to close their companies. So we don't know that for sure yet. What we do know is that globally, the pandemic has meant for women that women have to, take a larger part in housework and roles around the house. Already, as I mentioned, women, they do 5 times as much chores at home as men do, which is already a lot before the pandemic. And I would say that is probably not improved in this time. So yeah, we will have to see how that's also going to affect the survey then.
Really interesting stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to digging deeper into those studies. So, honestly, I think it's an understatement to say, but this has been a really fascinating and engaging conversation. Mia and Alma, really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm a little conscious that we're coming close to our time now, so perhaps we can wrap up the conversation. Maybe we can just end by asking you, what are your hopes for the next few months on a personal level, for the project itself? And is there any kind of key takeaway you'd leave our audience with today?
Well, I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. If there is anyone out there that could be, thought leaders, scholars, female entrepreneurs, maybe a female entrepreneur in Japan, don't hesitate to reach out to us, either via Facebook or LinkedIn, or dropping a comment. Would love to hear your point of view. That brings us to the next thing, really. We just want to hear as many stories as possible, to learn as much as we can, and to hear, the stories of encouragement, but also the stories that are challenging, and to learn as much as we can.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting us to your show. We know that you make quite a lot of good shows showing Japan from the international perspective. So we feel very honored to be invited to this show. And as Mia said, thank you. And as Mia said, we would like to come in touch with female entrepreneurs in Japan, or similar researchers who are doing another research on female entrepreneurship or female empowerment projects in Japan. And then, yes, the survey will be launched next year. And we also want to come to Japan to conduct the field study once that is possible.
You heard it here, folks. Mia and Alma, thank you so much for sharing your story with us on Bento Bureau. And thank you to our lovely audience that's tuned in today. If you like this episode, don't forget to like this post and share it with your friends and subscribe to the podcast, of course. And by all means, leave us your thoughts and suggestions in the chat, or even shoot us a message directly. We always love to hear from you. And of course, you heard the call of action here today. If you know any female entrepreneurs, you know the right place to go. All right, let's wrap up Bastion in our good old-fashioned cheesy way. I don't think they're going to be wanting to come on our show anymore after this, but let's go for it.
Let's go for it.
Gocho sama deshita. Thank you so much.